Do you unironically pick human as your main race? Do you like to complete side quests not for the reward, but for the smile on the face of every NPC? Does the very thought of a Dark Urge campaign make you cringe? Well, I think I found the servant for you. Hello everyone, Soberoni of G&A Reviews here, with a spotlight for the servant that proves nice guys do finish first, Charlemagne. We'll be examining his stats and skills, as well as going over pointers to how you utilize him effectively, and an overall grade comparing him to how he stacks up to the other 5-star servants. So if you want to sit at the cool guys table, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe, and ring my bell so you can catch all of these spotlight videos as they go up, and you can help out the channel. And now, on to Charlie's stats. Charlemagne has a max HP of 14,248 and a max attack of 12,015. Both his attack and HP are pretty average for a 5-star saber, but are well above average when compared to the rest of the SSR servants. When it comes to his command cards, Charlie has 4 hits on his quick card, 3 hits on his arts, 5 hits on his buster, and 5 hits on his extra card. He has an NP gain rate of 0.48% and a star rate of 10%. Charlemagne has about average star generating and slightly below average NP gain due to his low rate. As far as sabers go, Charlemagne is mediocre stat-wise, but that still rounds out to far better stats than most SSR servants have, and he has a strong all-rounder build with both high defense and high attack. Taking a look at his skills, Charlemagne's first skill is Traveling the Path of the King, rank C. This skill grants one ally invincibility for 2 hits, and if Charlemagne himself doesn't have invincibility, this skill will also increase his own NP generating for 5 turns between 10 and 20% depending on level, as well as grant him a heroic king buff every time he's attacked by an enemy. If Charlemagne does have invincibility though, he will inflict NP seal on himself for 1 turn as a demerit. This skill can be upgraded via a strengthening quest to Traveling the Path of the King, rank C+, which grants the added effects of adding a star bomb, generating between 5 and 15 crit stars depending on level, and giving Charlemagne an additional heroic king buff whenever he crits with one of his cards. For his second skill, he has Emperor of the Paladins, rank EX. This skill increases the party's attack for 3 turns between 10 and 20%. It also increases their damage against demonic enemies between 20 and 30%, and their defense against divine enemies between 20 and 30%, as well as charges Charlie's own NP gauge between 20 and 30%, all of these effects depending on level. And finally, his last skill is Mana Burst Light, rank A. This skill increases his own quick card effectiveness for 3 turns between 20 and 30%, increases his crit damage for 3 turns between 20 and 30%, and increases his crit damage against evil alignment enemies for 3 turns between 30 and 50%, all of these effects again depending on level. For his passives, Charlemagne has Magic Resistance rank A, which increases his debuff resist by 20%, and Riding rank A, which increases his quick card effectiveness by 10%. Moving on to his deck and Noble Phantasm, Charlemagne has a Quick Arts deck with Quick Arts Buster and a Quick Noble Phantasm. His Noble Phantasm is Joyous Order. It's an AoE quick attack that deals damage to all enemies with a damage modifier between 600 and 1000% depending on NP level. It also gets a 10% buff in damage for each stack of Heroic King that Charlemagne has, and it reduces all enemies' quick resistance for 3 turns between 20 and 40% depending on overcharge. Much like Crimhild, Charlemagne has some annoying Ascension mat requirements that revolve around a particular bronze mat. For level Ascension, Charlemagne's going to need 15 Knight Medals, 8 Phoenix Plumes, 44 Heroes Proof, and 36 Ceremonial Blades. While for his skills, he's going to require 12 Phoenix Plumes, 30 Knight Medals, 24 Crowns of Radiant Silver, and a whole 72 Ceremonial Blades per skill. It shouldn't come as a surprise, but Charlemagne exemplifies everything it means to be a paladin. He's all about that lawful good life. And in keeping with that theme, even his class, Saber, is usually home to warriors who exemplify selfless heroics and badassery. His stats are a little middling compared to the other Sabers, but they're by no means bad. And in fact, Charlemagne actually has phenomenal offensive and defensive stats compared to most other servants. Because, as you'd expect of a paladin, Charlemagne can both tank heavy damage and dish it out. Seriously, every aspect of Charlemagne's kit feels like it was custom made for a paladin in a tabletop campaign, and it's really damn cool. His first skill, Traveling the Path of the King, is a bit wordy, but basically it's a targetable invincibility that protects an ally for 2 hits. If Charlie uses this invincibility on another ally instead of himself, he also gains the benefit of an additional 20% NP gain and a unique buff that grants him a stack of Heroic King whenever he gets hit by an enemy. If Charlie targets himself with invincibility though, then he won't get those extra buffs, and in addition he will be hit with an NP seal demerit. This skill was also recently buffed in JP and gained the additional effects of generating 15 crit stars and giving Charlie an additional stack of Heroic King whenever he crits. Alright, before we talk about the gameplay, I need to say that this is one of the best translations of lore that I've ever seen translated into a skill. As a paladin, it makes sense that his goal is to shield others, which is represented by that targetable invincibility. But if he chooses to use his powers to protect himself instead, then that can be interpreted as him breaking his vow of protection, hence the demerit, as if God himself is taking away his ability to use his noble phantasm. It's just so cool on so many levels of lore and continuity, and we really need more flavorful skills like this, Lasangle. Okay, nerd rant over. The skill itself is actually pretty good too in its own right. It's a mini protection from arrows that can target anyone, so it provides tremendous value and utility. And while the demerit for targeting yourself is bad, chances are that if you need to target yourself for invincibility, it's worth not being able to NP for a turn. The skill also provides him his main source of Heroic King buffs. Each stack of this buff increases his NP damage by 10%, so this skill can actually serve as a gigantic NP steroid too. It's both a powerful offensive and defensive tool, kinda like a paladin. But Charlemagne also has access to more conventional means of buffing himself in the form of his second skill, the Emperor of Paladins. This is a charisma skill that also buffs the party's damage against demonic enemies and boosts their defense against divine enemies. It also charges Charlemagne's NP by 30%, yet another example of a very flavorful skill with the anti-demonic damage and that boost against divine enemies. Practically speaking though, those two things aren't as useful outside of some very niche situations. What really makes the skill good is that NP charge, which enables Charlie to loop. And finally, his last skill, Mana Burst Light, is a 30% buff to quick cards and crit damage, as well as a 50% buff to crit damage against evil enemies. Being anti-evil of course fits Charlemagne's whole theme, and there are a decent amount of evil aligned enemies in the game. So Charlie can be an absolute crit god against evil enemies, but even outside of that, this skill is still decently strong buff that has good synergy with his charisma. For skill order, make sure you level his NP charge first, followed by the quick buff, and then invincibility last. For append skills, pick up both mana loading and his anti-berserker buff. Charlemagne's NP is an AoE quick attack that reduces enemy quick resist and scales in power with the amount of Heroic King buffs that he has. There are a couple of important things to note about this NP. Firstly, it's an AoE quick attack with a truckload of hits, 12 in total, so it is phenomenal for looping in Scotty teams. Paired with Scotty, especially the upcoming Summer Scotty, Charlemagne will get considerable NP refund and will be able to effortlessly loop for farming, very similar to Saber Okitan. The other major thing to note is that the scaling on his NP is insane. For each Heroic King buff, he gets an additional 10% NP damage, up to a max of 120%. That means that at max stacks, Charlemagne's NP is capable of hitting even harder than a single target Noble Phantasm. It can reach near Nero Bride and Sigurd levels of damage. However, realistically speaking, you will almost never hit max stats. You'll usually hover around 3 to 5, depending on the setup that you have, maybe 5 through 8 after Charlie's strengthening quest, unless you have a really dedicated team. Still though, it is a strong buff. This lets Charlie function effectively both in farming teams where he can exploit the loopability of his NP, and also work well in boss fights where he can take his time building Heroic King stacks and attacking at full power. As far as damage potential goes, this is one of the more versatile Noble Phantasms in all of FGO. In fact, versatility is Charlemagne's middle name. He's just capable of playing so many roles on a team. As I mentioned, he's a quick farmer that you can build around in Scotty teams. He also works very effectively as a main DPS in slower challenge quests that allow him to build up power, and he even functions really well as a sub DPS where he can protect and provide buffs to all allies. Charlie doesn't just have to rely on his NP either. Once he gets his strengthening, he also becomes one of the better crit DPS sabers in Quick. He has a powerful high uptime crit buff, and he can generate his own stars from both his skill and his multi-hit Noble Phantasm. Unfortunately, he doesn't fare quite as well against non-evil enemies, since he does lose a significant portion of his crit damage, and this holds true in Charlemagne's other roles as well. He is excellent in niche situations, but not really really the best for everything. For example, he's a good farmer, but since his damage mostly relies on slowly stacking buffs, he isn't quite as good as Saber Okitan. He's excellent in challenge quests when he's allowed to stack buffs, but doesn't have the utility of someone like Melt. It's another case of jack of all trades, master of none. Unless you're specifically fighting evil or demonic enemies, Charlemagne's potential is limited, and that lack of consistency prevents him from reaching the highest levels of the elite tier. Make no mistake though, Charlie is still strong, especially in the right team comps. Like I mentioned, Scotty is the premier support for him, since she enables all types of quick looping farming teams, while servants who can buff crit damage like Waver and Caesar also make for excellent crit supports in longer fights. Charlemagne's Bond CE is a King's Blade, a Hero's Blade. It increases the party's damage against evil and demonic enemies by 15%. This isn't really worth using on Charlie, mostly because it hampers his own offensive capabilities too much. Instead, just give him CEs that empower his quick cards and his crit damage, like Imaginary Around, Traces of Christmas, True Crimson Spear Trainer, or even Looking Up at the Starry Sky if you want to have a more sub-DPS role. In the future, Fist of Hail is a good choice for quick fights, since it does grant a burst of crit stars, as well as crit damage and quick card effectiveness, so it can really help Charlemagne stack his heroic king buffs early on and snowball. As for command codes, any of the ones that provide crit damage is good to use, but I recommend Majin Sun especially because it also provides Star Absorb, and that's one of the things missing from Charlie's kit. Overall, Charlemagne is a highly versatile quick servant who can fill a variety of roles very well. He makes for a strong farmer in Scotty teams thanks to his excellent NP refund and charge skill. He can even be built around as a viable main DPS for tough content due to his heroic king mechanic, and even if you already have a certified quick all-star like Melt or Kama, Charlemagne still provides service as a secondary DPS with good self-sufficient damage and utility. On the downside, he does suffer from the jack of all trades syndromes just a bit, but all in all, Charlie gets a strong B+ from me before his strengthening quest, which I will upgrade to an A- after his buff. Being able to stack heroic king buffs from critting really does help out his consistency tremendously. That way he doesn't just have to rely on enemy RNG. In my opinion, Charlie is a strong pickup for anyone considering building a quick team, especially if you're going for Summer Scotty in a couple of months. But for those of you who are already set with a strong offensive quick servant, there's no real need to pull for him, unless you really want to roleplay as a paladin. And those are my thoughts on Charlemagne. Personally speaking, I think his kit is one of the most creative and flavorful of probably any servant we've seen yet in FGO, and I just love it when Lysandriel takes this approach to the game design because it makes the servants feel so much more unique and fun to play. But what do you think? Let me know in the comments down below, and if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave a like and consider subscribing if you really enjoyed the video. Join the party over on our Discord, chill with us on Twitch, and follow us on Twitter, and I'll see you all in the next Servant Spotlight. So we're running out. Later.